Now let's compare the fates of the two recent referenda. The voters once again, God help them, voted no to gender equality. But consider the difference in the government's reply. The PLP chairman released the following statement: "Today, the Bahamian people spoke loud and clear by voting no in the majority on the 4 referendum questions placed before them today. The government respects and will abide by the will of the people pursuant to the Constitution." Now, what can we infer about the value system of the current government if its members consider it an imperative to promote and permit the seemingly uncontrolled proliferation of gambling houses, yet refuse to act to endow certain citizens' rights that never should have been omitted from the Constitution? In any discussion of this type, we cannot fail to consider the burgeoning role played by elements of the Christian church. Now, I used to call myself a Christian. I've shifted that to a follower of Christ. They have had a lot to do with the retrograde way in which Bahamians have come to think. I contend that a contingent of ministers actively promotes discrimination against all who do not submit to the straitjacket that their interpretation of Holy Scriptures imposes on all but themselves. I contend that this group have been prime promoters of societal inequity and the triaging of human rights with the aid of hypocritical politicians buying votes. The churches, especially the Baptists, can swing a lot of votes. Traditionally, the church, as the earthly avatar of Christ, has been considered, or should be, an agent for promoting shared values, social cohesion, and godly love. More and more, especially at the level of the fundamentalist congregations, pastors have grown more powerful and more political. And although scriptures clearly support the separation of the religious and secular powers, they're doing their best to blur and even obliterate the boundaries to our ultimate cost. They have dogmatized exclusion. Nowhere was this more clearly demonstrated than in the lead up to the referendum on gender equality. A group of pastors, ostensibly with the backing of their congregations, organized and heavily promoted a lobby to persuade Bahamians to vote against the bills noted in the plebiscite, even though 3 of the items were directed at establishing parity in the ability of Bahamian citizens to pass on citizenship to their children, regardless of a foreign birthplace or parental marital status. Some pastors suggested that such changes would expose Bahamian women to the predation of foreign men. I guess we must be pretty stupid. Oh yeah. The pastors and other like-minded promoted the bill directed, that infamous 4th one, at ending all gender bias as an open door to same-sex marriage, and advised a no. In their conflation of the authority of church and state, some religionists would deny all rights to homosexuals and relegate Bahamian women to the invidious position occupied by their counterparts in religious fundamentalist states. The ones out there in the Middle East. At best, such men and even women share these reactionary beliefs that would have women living as they did in ancient Palestine. Would this not, come on now, curtail the very real and essential contributions women make to leadership in all aspects of Bahamian life, and thereby further retard national development? In all fairness, it must be said that this religious lobby, the members of this religious lobby, were not solely responsible for the defeat of the gender equality referendum. Hidden beneath professional garb in high-priced offices, under the hats of righteous women in white, is that very belief that I've just been talking about, that women are subservient to men, or should be. Interestingly, one of the Vote No pastors, this really floored me, has joined that body I mentioned earlier that has now evolved into a political party who say they're in business to promote righteous government. Now, as a writer, I gotta read stuff. I read my Bible. I might as well tell you I am pretty knowledgeable on the subject. And I only need to mention the way Christ dumped one on the tricky fella who wanted him to say something that was subversive about that coin. And he said, whose face is it? On the coin, Caesar's. Will render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. So it seems to me that this dear gentleman is not doing his job. I think Christ should fire him. In the Bahamas, dangerously so, religion is becoming pharisaical and divisive, separating the sheep from the goats, as adjudged by certain religious leaders. With much aplomb and little scriptural authority, they are shortening the day of grace, prefiguring judgment, and co-opting the right to judge which the Lord himself has reserved to himself. We are forced to ask the question, is it not contradictory that pastors are growing more powerful, churches and congregations are getting bigger, yet Bahamian society is becoming more and more dysfunctional? There's a gap here someplace. I will now take a look at that dreaded subject, little only, education, which is generally accepted as a prime mover in character and psychological formation. I admit that the subject is much too fast to do even minimal justice to it this evening. But let me take the gloves off a little bit. Public education is failing Bahamians. Too many young ones are being disgorged into a challenging and even hostile social and economic climate. Barely literate or numerate, it's amazing to me that so many of these people behind cash registers, when the lights go out, I mean, they can't give change. I guess we've taken on the American habit. It's too hard for you, so, go ahead, use your computer, use whatever mechanical device you have to add and subtract. Whereas, I guess I'm too old and too old-fashioned. You had to do mental arithmetic in the classroom. That was the basic, to be able to tot up a couple of figures or subtract or multiply. You certainly had to know the tables. But after 12 years, it's a shame. 12 years in the classroom, and they are neither fish nor flesh nor good red herring in terms of possessing the right articulators for employment or for finding satisfying and equitable places in society. More to our despair, the system is significantly failing the brightest students in the public system, and there are many. I can tell you, those of you who may not have been or are not educators, we really do have students, many with even genius potential in the public schools. Most won't achieve that potential, however. They're not being taught to think analytically or globally, and not sufficiently challenged either academically, generally, or in terms of community participation. In such cases, how prepared can they be to discover, innovate, or make significant national contributions. So where are we today? Let me sum up the psychocultural obstacles that I mentioned in the title. The Bahamas has developed a people who are mainly focused on self and what they can appropriate or misappropriate for themselves in the short term. With a limited radius of identification, some Bahamians care little for their neighbors, for the promotion of community, or for philanthropy, for volunteerism, or for the protection of the environment that sustains us all. Such egoism is happy and eager to support governments that are like-minded. And its first rat in the whole tail cover. A paucity of research, thinking, ability to see corollaries of a central problem or desire, shaky long-term planning and logistics do not bode well for one of the most serious of the national enterprises, projects facing us, the long overdue production of a national development plan. National development is also stunted by a tribalism that has created insiders and outsiders within the body politic and spurns equitable distribution of opportunity. Political tribalism has obliged us to vote into parliament, forgive me for this, ignoramuses who are good for nothing more than making up the numbers, warming the back and sometimes even the front benches, seeking only to secure what they can for themselves. Currently, religious tribalism has created and supports similar leaders whose goals often march in step with those of the politicians. Religious tribalism has also created its own criteria for who should be in and who should be out of reach of the land of milk and honey and the benefits on offer here below. It would deny us the potential contributions of a significant portion of the population. Short-term grabbing and an inverted view of competition and collaboration doesn't sit well with education development. We have an education system where academic and social achievement are in inverse proportion to the public funds invested in its development and maintenance. I wonder where the money went. We are about to declare the University of the Bahamas, but dare we examine now, people, I have a right to talk. I helped to build that institution. But dare we examine too closely the quantity and quality of research that the institution has produced in its 40-plus years? I'm talking about groundbreaking research that can move the nation forward positively and sustainably. Underpinned by millions of dollars of public funds and clever foreign public relations gurus, our leaders put on magic shows for an undereducated and gullible populace. When from time to time the stage manager falls asleep or steps out to relieve himself, the curtain goes up too soon, the props fall down, and we discovered that we've been fooled. We find to our despair that it has been a farce and that what we have received is not worth the price of admission. By then, the kitty is empty, and so are our hopes for a better future. This tells me that we are on a fast train to anomie. In other words, anarchy, chaos. So what are we going to do about it? And there is something we can do. We can each, according to ability, light a candle or candles to help dispel the darkness. Your starting point can be as simple as not being a part of the destructive egoism,